There were some ants in the house, and so I called this Greenix, and then I looked online and saw that it's a scam, and so I told them to refund me the little deposit I'd paid them stupidly, and this little scrap that's an artifact of that experience would be something to throw in a fire. A Box of Matches by Nicholson Baker, best-selling author of Vox. I've just finished reading this for the second time, and I've had a very, 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 very good time. I was kind of skeptical because I remembered it being kind of a nothing book, but I think there were many problems with my first read. Nothing book meaning a book about nothing, like a book where the drama never reaches above a certain sort of low peak, and that being some sort of like problem with it or deficiency with that it had compared to other Nicholson Baker books. But there were problems with my first read, I've learned. I read it in this vintage paperback, cover design by John Gall, and I showed this book to some people. I would take it out of my backpack and they'd go, "Oh, it's so beautiful." I love this little house with its little chimney. There's a great chimney section in here. Good stuff about chimney sweeps and lungs and storms and lungs and health and declining health and getting things going with your tongue, turning the page with your tongue, all kinds of cool things. One of my favorite things about this book is how motifs will thread through. The term strand of DNA comes to mind, but I don't think that's totally merited. But they will weave through. I really should have done that wick better before I lit it. You know, and you'll get to feel that when things show up again, they are now intersecting with new things that are important, kind of like the flaps of an envelope are intersecting. The great thing at the end about the envelopes. Okay. Yeah, back to just the physical nature of this book. I think I got this copy used. I think I got it from Powell's Books in Chicago. I had it many years ago because I had it when I met Nicholson Baker at Sun Co-op Bookstore, and he signed my copy. And that was the day he said he really liked my pocket notebook because he liked the way my pocket notebook seemed to have been actually stashed in my pocket for a while, as indeed it had. And it had been stashed in my pocket and sweated on for, you know, in case that's too much information, and, you know, it had been drenched with rain through the fabric of my pocket too. You know, like it had really been through some stuff. This is my current pocket notebook, a composition book. Mostly empty because I'm kind of just starting it. I ended up putting in a quote from this book: "The only real achievement of a sickness is the creation of a fever." You know, Nicholson Baker comes across as a sweet person who has an appreciation for the accomplishments and dreams of others, be they ants or anything, ducks, cats, anything. Nicholson Baker seems like if he were a writing teacher, he'd just be like, I don't know, like, you know, his poetry class would be like, well, poems are just when something reminds you of something. So just let yourself be reminded and put down what things remind you of, you know, and then class would be dismissed and everybody would go out and just get to write about what was going on in their lives. And a lot of time that would otherwise have been wasted would not be wasted. Before I forget, I want to make sure I talk about at some point, like, the affinity with haiku that I think this has. The quickness of like registering your thoughts about an object right when it goes into your eyeballs and you see it, and you are reminded of something. That quickness that I imagine him talking about if he were a writing instructor. I think that's also like a virtue in haiku. That's like my idea. That's my theory. That's something that I would have put on this third sticky note in the back if I had gotten to this third sticky note. Yeah, so one thing you'll notice about this one is that it's got lots of space between the lines, and for a while I was like, I don't like that much. I'd rather just be 100 pages and look like the mezzanine. But I think it's important for it to have the line spacing, because that way it allows chapters to take up an amount of space that makes them feel more like a slow morning, rather than them looking like a couple of paragraphs that are quickly to be kind of gotten through, like paragraphs of close text that are clotting a contract that you're supposed to read or something. Like, that's not how this book should look. I think that the choice to use space was actually good. I came around on that. I think many editions of this book have like striking areas on them. And by many, I mean just like the American and the UK one. So basically the deal with this book is that it's 33 chapters. So in a box of diamond matches, there are 32 matches. And this book has 33 chapters. So I actually don't know why there's 33 chapters if there's only 32 matches in a box. I think maybe one morning he wakes up so late that he doesn't get to use it or something. I don't know. But the basic structure for a chapter is that he tells you when he wakes up and what waking up was like, and then either will be very concrete about what happened in the morning, beginning with what fuel was fed to the fire, which I think is very important, or by going into memory pretty quickly. Many times doing both, being very concrete and being very memory, and being very concrete within memory, being very very minutely detailed in memory. Apples are a big theme here, apples and fruit in general. There's a really great bit in here where he talks about how a ripe pear has a nice disintegrating quality to its skin against your molars when you eat it. And so the chapters go on like this. There's another morning, and you get the fuel that goes on the fire. This chapter you don't seem to get the things that are thrown on the fire, but in many chapters you do. I think that the food is very important. The food of the fire is very important. It reminds me of you could kind of think of yourself as writing your own box of matches book by just throwing some things in the fire of your imagination and memory and letting it kind of burn a little fire in a dark place, where other people aren't contemplating what has come before in their lives, and enjoying that. You are, because you've thrown food on the fire, and the fire is like a cheerful dog that waits by the table as you feed it life scraps. I think that the metaphor of food for the fire, it's not really even a tough metaphor. It's not it's kind of this, but what's so great about reading Nicholson Baker is that it's such clever writing, but it is not clever that its point is not to be clever, is never to be clever. If something is if something a character is reminded of is kind of expected, that you don't think about that, because everything that they're reminded of is something that they're genuinely reminded of. And so I think the first time I read this book, I think I was skimming through it. I might have been doing schoolwork or something, and I really wanted to kind of skim through it and just have read it for some reason. And this is one that you have to read more slowly. I think also, I feel like Bashow's The Narrow Road to the Deep North, I didn't read that well until very recently too. And I think that you need to have the ability to slow down while reading and be able to read something where nothing happens. Basically where I think the point of the book is to identify with the narrator's experience in small moments, their small observations. You need to be able to do that. And I think one way you can do that is by, having a little bit of life on you, under your belt, so that you can empathize with lots of the observations. And rather than kind of skimming over a bunch of space where nothing happens, you feel like you're really running up into lots of cool little cities and events where things that you relate to are happening and being discussed. Yeah, when I finished the book, I was in tears. I had my orange cat was right next to me between the edge of the sofa and my leg, and just sleeping and twitching. And then my little tiny cat, Penelope, was just kind of on her little cushion sleeping, and I was admiring how both cats... Oh, there's a siren. Both cats have found their favorite ways to sleep so soon after getting them, just a couple of weeks after getting them, It's very sweet how they learn how to live in their new place. And so I was kind of in tears by the time I got to the end of this. I want to look at some of these notes here. I thought it was fitting to read this after my psychedelics book, my Trip. I recently read Trip. I also like matches and candles now in a way that I didn't the first time I read it. I already talked about Oh yeah, tender frame of mind. Look at your cat sleeping after this. Yeah, I just thought that like looking at my cat's hypnic jerks after reading this book was always like they were always very intense to behold and appreciate. Years are burned like logs, and so I think like one way to look at like preparation for reading a box of matches and then writing your own box of matches is to have a few years, or to burn some of your years, even if you're just 16 years old, to burn some of those in writing like logs. That's not exactly the sense in which he makes the comparison of burning years to burning logs, but that's just another way of taking it. Like you can maybe like lift up years and burn them as and that could be your way of thinking of writing about them. Although that's not a good way of thinking of things, because years aren't exhausted in that way. It's a heat wave right now in Madison, and the warmth of the fire is kind of weird to always contemplate while reading it in very hot days. Everyone's taking refuge in the basement, even the mouse that my cats have found. And I've already talked about how fuel for a fire is good, is a great kind of through metaphor. So basically, I'm just going to stop talking here. I reread a box of matches, my second recent reread. I reread Trip, and now I reread A Box of Matches. Both were fantastic comfort reading. And they both are instructive for I think, the kind of things I want to edit my writing into, the things I want to edit for and select for when I'm writing, like writing a diary entry even. And I love these books, and I really enjoyed this book. And I'm glad that I didn't get deterred by the fact that it's signed from just reading it and taking it around and, and carrying it under my shirt between the car and the house in the rain and so forth. And it's raining right now, which makes the candle that much cozier. So that's a bit about my reread of A Box of Matches. 178 pages, 1.5 spaced vintage book from the early 2000s, right before Checkpoint, which is definitely a book I should reread. I think Checkpoint and Vox, these conversation novels, are novels that I didn't really fully get when I read them. And I think actually having read so much Ashbery will probably prepare me for that, because I'm used to like enjoying the polyphony of something and then like inhabiting a couple of voices and kind of performing them in my mind. I'm probably better at reading plays now than I was before. So this is right before Checkpoint, and I think right after Double Fold, I want to say. So now Double Fold is a book I haven't read. I spent a good amount of time today thinking about how I really want to acquire Baseless, Human Smoke, the controversial one, and Finding a Likeness, his new book about drawing, which is going to really strike a chord because I've been drawing, I've been drawing things all the I drew this thing. I drew this car with dripping tires. Yeah, it just seems like every year brings new reasons to be frothing at the mouth to read a certain Nicholson Baker book. And I think that my reasons for frothing at the mouth to read this one was like, I want to continue this comfort reading train, this microscopic literature train, this, making art from mundane life train. And I also just want to, hold a beautiful book. I want to hold a beautiful paperback. So thanks for watching. If you've watched this far, maybe this has made you want to read A Box of Matches. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe it's made you want to strike a match. I don't know. Maybe it's made you want to read some other Nicholson Baker book. Or maybe I've encouraged you, hopefully I can encourage you to reread a book that you knew you would love, but that you didn't really maybe pay enough attention to in the first place. I have decided that if I ever meet Nicholson Baker again and get him to sign this book, I'm going to bring a pen in a different color and just tell him to sign right below where he did the first time. I just want to see his reaction to that. Signing off. I'm kind of like impatient to sign off just because I want to like find another book and keep reading.